Sorry about that. I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, so we didn't have any help to do anything. If you wanted something done, you get it done yourself. My name is Ralph Morales, and it is a true honor and a great blessing and very humbling to be here today. Before I start, I want to thank our veterans that were here, that received those wonderful certificates. I can say, having never served, but having a grandfather and obviously an uncle that served our country, veterans are the very fabric of our country. America is not America without those men and women that take up and serve us by serving their country. You were all heroes. No matter what you did, no matter where you were, no matter how long you served, you are the bedrock and the very foundation of our country. And I say it with complete sincerity, there is no America without our veterans. So thank you very much. Now, you know what's interesting? I've been practicing since '96, almost 30 years. And so, I've walked around these hallways many times. Lawyers have a very strange habit of equating what we do to war. And it's sort of awkward. So I don't know if you've ever walked around the hallways, you'll hear lawyers say, especially trial lawyers, they like to talk about themselves as warriors. I'm a warrior because I tried a case. You might have heard other lawyers say, well, it was like hand-to-hand combat during that trial. You might have heard others say, well, I completely destroyed that witness on cross-examination. And then, if you were sitting in the park, you might have heard lawyers say, yo, I didn't think it was going to make it out alive of that oral arguments. Can you believe that Judge Catalpana Fox wants us to know the facts of our cases? She's a drill sergeant. And of course, what do warrior lawyers do? They sit in court for 3 hours, surfing the web, playing Candy Crush, for a couple of hours, right? And then they come up with the conference for about 30 seconds. And after all that work, they got to go across the street because nothing says warrior like going to Starbucks and getting, I wrote this down because I don't drink this stuff. Like drinking a venti caramel ribbon crunch frappuccino. That doesn't say warrior, I don't know what does, right? And no, for us lawyers, I'm sorry to say, you don't get a Purple Heart. You get that real nasty paper cut on your finger, reaching into your bag to grab out your summary judgment motion. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. Being here in Jamaica, Queens is a homecoming for me. If you exit the courtroom, or the courthouse, you make a left and another left on 89th Avenue, and you walk down 89th Avenue for about 12 minutes, you get to my house on the corner of 169th Street, 89th Avenue. That's where I grew up. And more importantly, the two main characters of my book, my mother, Lillian Santinello Morales, and her younger brother, Vinny Santinello, they grew up in that house too. And it would be nice if I could say that my mom was a lawyer or a judge. She wasn't. My mom was a very simple woman. She graduated from Jamaica High. Right out of Jamaica High, she started working. And that's sort of the way it was. It was a blue-collar family. My grandparents, Carmen and Rose Santinello, they raised 3 children, Lily, her brother Vinny, and another brother, also named Carmine. Lily was born in 1946. And while she was always quick to say that she wasn't the smartest person around, my mom had street smarts that you wouldn't believe. If you're gonna grow up in Jamaica, Queens, you need those street smarts. You need that common sense. And my mom's brother, Vinny, graduated from Edison High School in 1966, right up here also, not too far from here. And he joined the Marines. He voluntarily enlisted in the Marines the following year, 1967. So 1 year out of Edison High School, he was a Marine. It's really ironic and a blessing to be here during the Queens County Women's Bar Association event because my mom, Lily, was the greatest person I knew. My mom was the strongest person I knew. And she was also my best friend. I confided everything in my mother. And I thought she confided everything in me because we were sort of peas in the pod. And so it was interesting when I lost my mom very suddenly on July 26th in 2002. She passed away at the age of 55. And shortly after she passed away, my siblings and I were going through some belongings of hers. And we came across a box. And I opened the box, and inside that box were dozens of really old, dusty letters. I'd never seen them before. So I started opening up these letters and taking a look at them, and I realized they were letters from Vinny to my mom, from Vietnam, from back in 67 and 68. The last letter was written the morning he was killed, on March 28 of 1968. And what was truly enlightening and sort of sad in many ways is that I'm reading these letters and I realize a few things. First off, my mom never told me about these letters. And my mom told me everything, down to how many cigarettes you smoked that day. But I didn't know anything about these letters. The other thing I realized was that my Uncle Vinny, and again, I grew up in the same house as Vinny. Vinny was more myth than man to me as a kid. Nobody spoke about Vinny. My grandfather, who I loved, he was really like a dad to me, never spoke about his son. My grandmother Rose never spoke about him. My mom never spoke about him. His younger brother Carmine never spoke about Vinny. So Vinny, again, I was born 16 months after he was killed. The only thing I knew about Vinny was that he was probably some really old dude, right? Some really old guy. I'm 56 now, so some old dude was like 30 years old, right? He must have been some really old guy who died in a war that happened before I was born. You sort of heard about Vietnam in the 70s, but as a kid, you don't know. So all Vinny was to me was this myth, and walking down at the basement of our house, there was a very low staircase, and there were names that were written on the ceiling, and Vinny was written, V-I-N-N-I-E. And I remember as a kid, I was always fascinated by that, because I always wondered, who is this Vinny? My younger brother was also named Vinny. My middle name is Vincent. So clearly Vinny had a big impact on my family. But going back, I read these letters, and I realized right away that I had to write a book based on these letters. It was my mission, my life's mission at that point. And the only problem with that was that all Vinny was to me was a scribbled name on a ceiling and two pictures that were up on a wall in my family's house of this Marine guy with a bunch of young Vietnamese children. And that picture will flash up here at some point. But that's all Vinny was to me. So I realized if I'm gonna write a book, it's not gonna be a fiction. I'm not gonna make it up. It's not doing an honor. So I made it my life's work to try to find people that knew Vinny. And I spoke to some great aunts, my grandfather Carmine, his sisters. I spoke to them, and they provided me with a lot of context about young Vinny, growing up in Jamaica, which was awesome. But I knew nothing about Vinny the Marine. And so I reached out to a gentleman, John Chang, who grew up with Vinny in Jamaica, Queens, was best friends with Vinny, told me that Vinny was like his brother because Vinny protected him. John Chang was half Chinese and half French and Indian. So he indicated that, given the way he looked and the way he sounded, kids would like to pick on him, or maybe worse, try to beat him up. And Vinny, being the tough kid from Jamaica, didn't let it happen. And John told me about these stories, 50 years later. John also told me that John served in Vietnam as well. He was a Navy corpsman. He was basically a medic to the men in the fields that were injured. And John was in Okinawa, Japan, serving the last month of his tour, because when you were in Vietnam, they didn't want you to spend your last days in Vietnam so you'd get killed. They would send you away so that you would spend the last month of your tour safe. So John was in Okinawa, and his captain called him over and said, "Hey John, I got a favor I need to ask you." He goes, "Do you know Carmine and Rose Santinello?" And John is like, "Yeah." He goes, "They gave me a call," and John broke down. He said, right away I knew what it was. My grandparents wanted John to accompany Vinny's body back home from Dover, Delaware, Dover Air Force Base. So John told me this story, through tears. And it really crushed me. But it gave me solace, it gave me hope, and it gave me some sense of pride, because now Vinny was becoming more man than myth to me. So I wrote those notes down, and I realized I still don't have a picture of who Vinny was. So for the better part of 10 years, I would go online, I would make phone calls, I would do whatever I could to find men and women that knew Vinny in Vietnam. And inevitably, I would get sort of the same story. Well, Vinny was a great kid. Well, what can you tell me about him? He was a really good guy. Okay, what did he do in Vietnam? Give me some stories. Yeah, it was really so long ago, I don't have much to say. And that was heartbreaking. And I would go to my mom's grave. She's buried at St. Charles Cemetery in Farmingdale. And I would go to Vinny's grave. He's buried in Long Island National Cemetery, which of course, given that they were best friends, Long Island National Cemetery is a stone's throw from St. Charles in the same Farmingdale area. So I would go to their graves, and I would promise my mom, I'm gonna get this book done, I promise you. I'd go to Vinny's grave, Uncle Vinny, I promise you I'm gonna get this book done. And then that promise sort of began to fade. Months turned into years, years turned into many years, And I was still sitting there scratching my head. And I sort of gave up, honestly. I thought it was never gonna happen. And these visits to the cemetery sort of became pity parties for me. I'd sit there, I'd kneel before my mom's grave and say, Mom, I'm so sorry, I let you down. I failed, I can't do this. I would go to Vinny's grave and I'd pray for divine intervention. Vinny, come down and give me something. And then nothing, but I was so upset. And then out of the blue in January 2014, I get this phone call. And it was a reporter from ABC News from out in LA. And he said, you Ralph Morales? Yes. Are you the nephew of Vincent Benor Santinello? And now I'm a little freaked out. I'm like, yeah, who are you? And he explained, I'm a reporter for ABC News. I just did a big piece on this man who's pretty popular out here on the West Coast, out in the Seattle area. You might want to give him a call, because I think he knows some stuff about your uncle. I'm like, okay. His name was Michael Regan. He was a Vietnam vet. Supposedly knew my uncle. So he gave me Mike Regan's phone number, and I called Mike, and I'll be honest with you, I was expecting nothing. I was expecting more of the same, of, oh, Vinny was a great guy, he was my buddy, I'm really sorry for your loss, is your mom still alive? Because those are the type of things I would hear from people. So I went into the conversation with no expectations. I get on the phone, immediately the voice of Michael Regan was very soothing, very, very disarming, and very at peace. He said, are you Vinny's nephew? And I hadn't even told him my uncle's name. So I answered affirmatively, yes, I'm Vinny's nephew, Ralph. And then Mike said, Ralph, you need to understand something. Your uncle was in no pain when he died. So now I'm thinking, all right, this is gonna be a little different than what I'm accustomed to. So I said, Mike, what are you talking about? What are you trying to say? He goes, your uncle was at peace when he died. Well, how do you know that, Mike? Because I was holding in my arms, and he died in my arms back on March 28, 1968, in Camp Hill, Vietnam. And as I'm sure you can imagine, I was stunned, and I was probably silent for a good 5 minutes. I don't even remember what I said after that. I just remember my head spinning. And then I remember him saying, Saint was in my arms when he died. And that really struck me, because nobody referred to my uncle as Saint. The only people that referred to Vinny as Saint were the guys in Vietnam. And I know that because my uncle, when he would sign his letters, if it wasn't Vinny or your stupid big brother, it was Saint. So I realized that this is something very, very important. So Mike Regan had started something called the Fallen Heroes Project back in 2004. Mike was a Vietnam vet. He served at around the same time as my uncle. He was also a bigwig in the Seattle area. He would draw celebrities. He always jokes around, I've drawn popes, and I've drawn Playboy bunnies. Who else can say that? And everyone in between. And he would sell these pieces of art. He's an amazing artist. He would sell these pieces of art and donate money to charities. He was also the head of the art department at the University of Washington, making a great living. And one day he explained, back in 2004, he got a call from a woman that he didn't know. And the woman said, are you Michael Regan? Yes, I am. She said, Mr. Regan, I understand that you're a very famous artist. I will pay you any amount of money you want to draw my husband. And Mike was like, what are you talking about? And she explained, my husband was killed in Afghanistan. He was a US Marine. And ever since he died, I haven't been able to sleep. I haven't been able to eat. I've been miserable. I feel alone. I'm totally upset. I don't know what to do with my life. So I will pay you anything. She says, I'll close out my bank accounts. I'll do whatever I can. And Mike said, you don't need to do that. I'm gonna do this for free, and I'm gonna get you the picture. So Mike drew the portrait, and he sent it to this widow, and didn't hear anything. A few weeks later, he gets a call from her again. Mike, I wanna thank you. And she sounded much happier to Mike. Why? What are you talking about? Well, ever since I received that portrait of my husband, I have it hanging in my bedroom, and he's smiling down on me, and I can hear him telling me he loves me, and I feel at peace again, and I can't thank you enough. So they hung up. Mike turned to his wife, Cheryl, and said, we gotta draw them all. And his wife was like, well, what are you talking about, Mike? He quit his job. And ever since 2004, all he has done in his basement art studio in Edmonds, Washington, is draw portraits of men and women who have been killed in service to our country. He's also drawn portraits of the children that were killed up in Connecticut. He's drawn portraits of people that were killed in churches down south. He's drawn almost 10,000 portraits now. And so the reporter asked him, Mike, why did you give up your life? You had a very lucrative career, you were making great money, you were drawing all these celebrities. And Mike said, because back when I was in Vietnam, on March 28th of 1968, one of my best friends was struck by a mortar. And it didn't kill him right away, but he was very badly injured. And I ran up to my buddy, it was my buddy Saint. And my two other friends, John Nunn and Tony Milazzo, two corpsmen, they were coming, they were trying to save Vinny's life, but Vinny was bleeding out. And Mike said, the reason I do this is because right before Vinny died, he looked me in the eyes and he said, Mike, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. And then he died in Mike's arms. And Mike realized, I've got to send everyone home. And so ever since then, like I said, almost 10,000 portraits later, this is what he's done. So I learned all this in that phone call, and Mike flew me out. It just so happened that Easter of 2014, he was celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Fallen Heroes Project. So I flew out there, John Nunn was there, Mike obviously was there, and Mike presented me with a portrait of my uncle, which is what I have here. This is Mike's portrait of Vinny, and I've had it hanging in my house ever since. I've had it in my office a few times as well. And one thing that struck me is after Mike presented me with the portrait, I go to sit down, I'm holding this, and it was very surreal. John Nunn, who I had just met 5 minutes ago, he goes, can I see that? I said, sure, John, of course. He takes the portrait. Now, John was probably in his late 60s or early 70s at the time. Grizzled old man, looked as tough as nails. His voice sounded like he had smoked at least 8 billion Pall Malls in his life. Okay? God knows what else he ingested. And he looked at the portrait. And in the middle of the room, it was very quiet. He started to wail and cry. And he kept screaming, Vinny, Vinny, I'm so sorry. I failed you, Vinny. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And crying all over the portrait. And I realized, my God, the impression that my uncle must have made on these men, but the impression they made on each other. So I subsequently met Tony Milazzo. He was from New Jersey. And Tony and Vinny used to, by the way, that's the picture that was hanging in my house with the kids. Tony and Vinny used to joke all the time in Vietnam. Tony was from the Jersey Shore. Vinny, being a Queens kid, thought, what do you think? Rockaways, of course. So they would fight who had the better beaches and the prettier girls, go figure. Tony insisted that it was Jersey Shore. Vinny, gave props and represented for Queens, saying it was Rockaway. But I met these men and I heard their stories, and they gave me context to a man that I knew nothing about. And the stories that they gave me inspired me to write this book. Now, is a lot of the book still fiction? Yeah, of course. But there are stories in that book that are absolute replications of what these heroes told me, particularly of different fighting scenes that they reenacted for me. And it was really enlightening, but also very sad for me, because when these men, these heroes to me, were talking about this, these are tough guys, right? They're Marines. I'm a lawyer. No toughness in me, okay? These guys were tough, and all of them would break down. All of them would cry. And I would always say, guys, look, I'm really sorry. Let's stop. We don't have to do this. And they say, no, no, no. I'm glad to do this. This is actually good for me, because I've been holding this in for 40 years, almost 50 years. And for the first time, I'm able to share stories of Vinny, of Saint, of our brother. And John Nunn said, I carry Vinny in my heart every day and I wear him on my wrist. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he had a bracelet with my uncle's name on it. And it had Vinny's name, his rank, and his date of death, and where he was killed. It was a KIA bracelet. And John gave me the same bracelet, which I still wear 10 years later. Never take it off. Except when I shower, I don't want to get rust all over. So it was a blessing to know these men. And it helped to transform Vinny, who was nothing but a picture and nothing but a name on a ceiling, to a loved one, to someone that I could look up to be the uncle that I never got to love. And it's ironic, when I first started writing the book, I was so intimidated, because I'm thinking, how can I write about someone I don't know? But I can tell you, as I wrote that book, I swear to God, Vinny was with me, helping me write it, because words were just flowing out of me in ways that I still don't comprehend. And by the end of that book, Vinny went from being just some strange guy who died a long time ago in a war that was before my time to one of my best friends. And I have a video of the guys that I do want to introduce you to them. So if you give me a second, hopefully the technology works.
My name is John Chang. I live in Surprise, Arizona. I served in Vietnam in 1967 to 1968. From March of 67 to April of 68.
And what capacity did you serve when you were there, John?
I was a corpsman, combat corpsman, MOS 8404. I served with the 1st Battalion, 5th Marines in combat, and my job was to give first aid and do my best to keep them alive.
You serve.
Michael Regan. I live in Edmonds, Washington, north of Seattle. I was in Vietnam in 1967 and 68 at the DMZ. My initial fire base, which was how we were located in the war, was called Con Tien, the summer of 1967, and it was the closest fire base to North Vietnam. It was 1 mile from the DMZ. So everything that came to us first.
What was in what capacity did you serve? What was your
I
rank?
was 0311 rifleman. Part of the way through my tour, I became a squad leader. So I had some people I was responsible for other than me and all my friends. We're really responsible for each other anyway, all the time. But I was given that responsibility, and I was proud of that. And but it's tough to have that responsibility for what was supposed to be 13 other people.
All right, my name is Tony Milazzo. At the time in 1967, I was a 20-year-old Navy hospital corpsman, and I was assigned to the 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, 1st Platoon, as a corpsman. For those that don't know what a corpsman is, it's the Marines combat medic. It was November 1967. Like I said, I was 20 years old. I'm from Paterson, New Jersey, currently living in West Milford, New Jersey. Had no idea what I was getting into. And an immediate connection between the Marines that I served with and the corpsmen, I realized that it's a very close relationship. There were 2 of us to a platoon, and the 2 of us were responsible for all the medical needs for about 55 Marines. And at 20 years old, scary to say, I was one of the older people.
My name is John Nunn. I live in Belen, New Mexico. I was a hospital corpsman assigned to the Marine Corps in Vietnam, 1967 to 1968.
And did you serve beyond that too, after 68?
Oh, yes. I still had, after I got home from Vietnam, I still had another 1.5 years of duty to serve. And that was the hardest, I think, of my life.
No, what's interesting about your service in Vietnam, John, is that you served at pretty much the same time that Vinny served, but you never saw each other while you were in country. Is that right?
That's correct. We wrote each other, but never saw each other.
Right. And obviously you and Vinny, the interesting part about this is you and Vinny were childhood friends. So if you could paint a portrait of who Vinny was growing up back in Jamaica, Queens, before he was the Marine in Vietnam.
He was a hell of a good guy. Young man, we all were young at that time, 54 years ago. Huh? But he was a good son to his mother and father, and a good brother to Lily and Carmine. And he was one hell of a great friend to me.
Vinny was part of our rear unit. I always knew him as the mailman. What Vinny was, he was the connection to our rear area, which was the connection to our home, which was the connection to our sanity. Vinny represented that connection. Without him, we didn't have it. Without it, the insanity of where we were, what we've gone through, the things that the book kind of describes, you couldn't make sense of it. So you had to grab hold of something, and Vinny was it. That's why we all loved him.
Well, he was just an all-around good guy, and he brought us mail and, you know, food occasionally, and, you know, just the main thing was the mail. And it just made a difference in your day or your week if you got a letter.
How did you come to learn of Vinny's death? Where were you, and what happened as a result of that?
I walked in, he said, "Hey, Doc, sit down, I want to talk to you." I said, "Before you start, if it's any problems, leave me alone. I didn't go off base, and I'll leave you right now." He said, "No, no, just calm, take it easy, just sit down, I want to talk to you." And then he basically told me that Carmine arose, Mr. and Mrs. Santinello. So he screws my head. Excuse me. Excuse me. Oh, he screws my head up.
Sorry, John.
Said that Mr. and Mrs. Santinello request that you bring Vinny's body home. He was killed in Vietnam. So less than a freaking day out of Vietnam, I'm getting news my best friend is killed. He said, "I'm sorry, Doc, but we're gonna have to find your sea bag. You're gonna have to get into, change out of those fatigues and get your uniforms, and we're gonna send you back to the States to escort Vinny's coffin back to New York."
It was a quiet morning. All of a sudden, we started getting mortar attacks and artillery attacks. And we heard corpsmen up as we were running around, and somebody yelled, "It's Saint." And what happened, everybody froze for a second, and then we started moving to where they were calling us. There were 3 other Marines at Saint's location who were DOA. They were dead when we got there. Saint was still alive. Mike Reagan was able to get Saint out from under his Jeep, brought him downstairs in the command post bunker, where John and I and Gene Holtzman, our company corpsman, were tasked with doing what we could to save Saint. He had serious wounds, and we did whatever we could. Unfortunately, it wasn't good enough, and Saint passed away from his wounds.
And there wasn't anything anybody could have done. But, he got to die in Michael's arms, and me and Tony Milazzo were working on him, but he was gone. To my recollection, he was hit in the femoral artery with shrapnel. So he was going to bleed out, even if he'd been in an operating room at that time.
Every time I open my iPad to get my emails and stuff, Vinny's face is on my iPad. He was my best friend, and he still is my best friend.
Why do you say that?
I don't get close to anybody. I don't.
How did it feel to read a book in which you were featured as a main character? Was that strange to you to read a book and see your name and representations of things that you had done,
Yeah.
creative ways of describing who you were back then?
Yeah, I was a little embarrassed that I had the most potty mouth of anybody. That's putting it mildly.
All of Vincent's life and that day changed me totally, as I've said. It was hard for me to put into words all the things I wanted to say about the book, because I know how important the book was to you, and I tried not, I mean, this is going to sound terrible. I tried to write the foreword without pleasing you. I tried to write the foreword by pleasing me. I needed to say something. How do you talk about, how was I going to write a foreword about a book that's addressing the issue of the man who's now dead, who changed my life for the best, and a lot of other people's? It's an impossible task for an artist. You, as an incredible writer, you probably could have done it, but I was trying to do it. I didn't want you to do it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so I'm very proud of it. I've read that forward a number of times. There's nothing I would have changed in it. So I think I'm proud of it. Proud to be part of all of this.
You did a wonderful job writing this book. That's my impression.
I don't want to end this on a sad note, so I want to end it on a funny note, but I want you to assume that this book is somehow adapted into a movie. Who's playing John Chang in the movie?
If he was Asian, I'd be Denzel Washington.
I have a really good friend, and he's a great actor, and he's incredibly good looking. His name's Jim Caviezel.
Bring Al Pacino back from the 1970s. Let him play me.
Little Michael Corleone, you're saying you look like Michael Corleone back in the day?
I guess she said, Michael Corleone, and I just laughed. So you said have fun with it.
I would like it to be Paul Newman or Steve McQueen, but that's not going to happen. So.
Shortly after this video, John Nunn passed away. Shortly after John passed away, Tony Milazzo passed away. Mike Regan is still with us. He's still drawing. John is still in Surprise, Arizona. In sum, let me just say that I want to thank the Queens County Women's Bar Association for this opportunity to share my uncle, to share my mom, Mike Regan, John Chang, John Nunn, Tony Milazzo, and scores of valiant fallen heroes who served our nation a lifetime ago. Once again, I want to thank our veterans that came here today. God bless all of you. God bless our veterans. God bless our fallen heroes. God bless our Gold Star families. And God bless America. Thank you all very much.
So thank you everyone for coming. The full video is I think on a website, and we're going to try to see if Ms. Morales can make it available on YouTube so everyone can see the rest of it. I've watched it, it's compelling, and again, thank you all so much for your time. I would also point out, I apologize, Honorable Scott Dunn was a service member of the Air Force, and we thank him for his service as well. Thank you all so much.